JKB back with another episode, and today I'm reviewing Yakuza Like a Dragon. Thank you to Sega for the review copy. This will be a spoiler-free review. Yakuza Like a Dragon, I mean, wow. You've probably heard of the series before, but now maybe is the perfect time to jump into it. Not only does Like a Dragon feature a new protagonist, but has one other major difference from the past games in the series, and that is the combat system is now turn-based, unlike every other major line game in the series, which was focused on beat-em-up arcade action when you got into the combat scenarios. This is also the first game since, well, the first game in the series to feature voice acting from an English voice cast. The first game had that, and well, let's just say it didn't go over well, and every game after that was brought over to North America did not feature an English cast. However, I feel Sega wants to kind of see this as a reboot or maybe a retooling of the series, so they've brought the English cast back, and now you can turn it on or off and go back to the Japanese if you want, and I have a feeling a lot of people will probably play it with the Japanese voice acting. However, the English voice acting isn't actually bad this time around, considering it's been missing from the series for a long time. If you've never played a Yakuza game before, you've been missing out. Not only is this series one of my favorite of all times, but these games are extremely entertaining from a story aspect, but the open world has so much to do. You'll spend so much time doing things which I'll get into later in the review, but the point here is you can become overwhelmed at times playing these games. I want you to look at this game as half soap opera and half video game. I don't know if there's a term for this in terms of video games, but when you really enjoy a book, you call it a page turner. Because, well, you want to know what happens next, so you're constantly turning those pages to get to the bottom line of the story. This game shares that same sentiment. It's incredible at times. I couldn't stop playing, and that's mostly because of the story. I wanted to know what happens next. As usual, I'm not going to spoil any of the story, but I will say the story had me feeling a very wide range of emotions. Some of which I expected to feel in this series, but maybe not as deep as I did. You'll go from feeling extremely heavy scenes on your heart that I consider to be some of the best in gaming. And I know that's crazy to say this, but you get so involved in some of these stories that you get emotional. And then you go to complete an absolute nonsense, over-the-top, silly story that you can't even believe is in a game, let alone this game. As for the main character, I do feel like diehard fans like myself of the last 6 games in the series may have a hard time getting into who this character is and what his story's about, but as the game goes on, you slowly start to like him as a character more and more, and you start to see his morals do match up with what you kind of expect from this series. This is an extremely deep RPG with lots of things to manage at all times. You'll have a party of characters that'll follow you around as you explore the cities. You'll also be able to do everything you would expect from a massive RPG. There's a ton of side activities in the game that are mostly played as mini-games. You can even sit at a Sega arcade and play some of Sega's classics from back in the day, and it's incredible to be able to do that, and that's something that, you've done in past Yakuza games, so I'm happy to see that they've brought that forward. As for the combat in the game, you enter into a combat situation when the characters on screen get too close to you while you're in the open world, just like in every other major RPG. The party will walk around at random, which means you can't control their movements during combat. Now, at first I thought that this was a problem, but I think the point of this is to add a little bit of chance into the battles. You'll be able to pick up environmental items around you during the attacks. This means that if a bike is sitting next to you on the road and your character is randomly walking near that bike, you might have a chance of hitting the attack button at the right time, and your character will pick up the bike and use it in the attack. Now, that's why I think it's at random, but I think some people out there will find this extremely frustrating because the camera does get stuck on signage and some of the buildings, However, you kind of get used to it quick. Now, combat is exactly what you would expect from a turn-based classic RPG. It's all about timing, it's about using items and using items to heal your teammates. It does what it should, and it does that pretty fast. I mean, the pacing of this combat almost feels like it's real time, so it's a really fast-paced turn-based situation. As you advance the story, you'll have new characters joining your team, which keeps the combat feeling new and fresh. For the hardcore fans out there, you'll be able to dig a lot deeper into the stats of each of the characters by doing side experiences in the game, such as having like job classes that have their own unique abilities and skills. This means you can be a cook with a frying pan and beat the hell out of your enemies, or even like sort of a singing idol that uses singing and their fans to attack enemies on screen. I mean, it gets goofy. For instance, maybe you want to bond with a party member. You can go to the movies together. You can have dinner together. The party members will level up and become stronger and gain new skills this way in the game. So if you see these activities, you should definitely be doing them if you want to build your party. I ran into a battle arena and even dungeons in the game that help you level up, but this battle arena was a 30-floor building with each floor featuring its own unique rules and different enemies. You'll get a ton of XP from going floor to floor, but you also start to get standard rewards after each floor is complete, and other rewards by completing different objectives on each floor. It's perfect for crafting materials, weapons, or equipment for your party members. Lastly, this wouldn't be a Yakuza game without the sub-stories. There's 50 of them in total, so you can spend around 20 to 30 to 40 hours just on the side missions, depending on how fast you play the game. There's a ton, and I mean a ton, of mini games. To name a few, there's slot machines, the movie theater, where you can play a mini game where you have to fight to stay awake during the movie, which is hilarious. There's also something called Dragon Kart. It's nuts. It's a Mario Kart style racer with weapons. Or how about you get a part-time job? I mean, it's crazy what you can do in this game. You'll spend over 80 hours playing this game if you play with a casual play style. There's so much in this game to do that I said in the beginning, it's overwhelming at times. But when you take things step by step, you have an absolute blast with everything in this game. Overall, Yakuza Like a Dragon is a must-play recommendation from me. While there's a few technical issues here or there, I can't say that there's anything really bad to say about the game that runs too deep. But the turn-based combat isn't perfect. I feel that fans of the series will have a hard time switching from the beat-em-up style to the turn-based combat. The only major issue, and I think maybe it is quite a big issue with the game, is that further into the game, the combat balancing seems a little off, and you have to go deeper into grinding, which means that you'll run into enemies that can wipe you out and your whole team with one attack. And I thought I was leveling up the proper way and I've got items, but no, it does seem a little off at the end. And I had to go back to the dungeons under the city to just level up my team to move forward in the game. In closing, I have to say the story, as usual and as expected, is absolutely incredible to experience in this game. While most people that love the old games should be able to get over the fact that we have a new protagonist, I think that some people will have a hard time with that. But I should mention there's a ton of scenes in this game, so if you've never played a Yakuza game, at times, sometimes you're watching essentially a movie, it feels like, for 10 minutes or 20 minutes at times. So be warned, the game does have a heavy story element, and that's very important that you guys know this. So in between the mini games and the combat, the story is gigantic. I'm gonna give Yakuza Like a Dragon a solid 8 out of 10. The only reason that it's not higher in my point of view is that combat, again, like I keep saying, and let's just be honest here, do I love turn-based combat games? Absolutely. I recently, in the last couple of years, got into turn-based RPGs and trying to understand them and how items and different party members work together. That's what it's about. It's like a giant puzzle piece that you have to figure out every time you get into a combat scenario. Now in this game, it just feels a little silly because you get these jobs that you can, get into. Like I said before, you can be an idol, you can even be a rock star, and they include, special skills and abilities, but using those didn't feel like special. It just felt like, oh, I just switched to this job and I've got a different look and different, abilities and skills, but using my main character without a job on top of it felt better, and it just felt right. And I don't know how to explain that. I just told you what it is. And the other point here is that 2 of the jobs, there's 15, but 2 of them are locked behind DLC that you have to pay for. So it's a little silly. I have to admit, I didn't really like that part of the game. But in closing, again, solid 8 out of 10. One of my favorite Yakuza games, definitely. Is it better than any of the other games in the series? I don't know about that. I'd say it's definitely on par, and it is definitely a really good start to introducing this protagonist. So I hope you guys really enjoy the game if you pick it up. I should point out I'm going to do a secondary video on this game because I played on my Xbox One X. It is using the smart delivery and will be available on Xbox Series X day 1. So I'm going to do a sort of a short little video on how that upgrades and how it looks visually and how it runs and all of that. So I hope you look forward to that. And I should say, if you've never played Yakuza, this is a great time to get into it. If you've never experienced a Japanese, ridiculous soap opera, this is incredible. So I'll see you guys on the next episode of JKB. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed my review.